On the night of September 10, during another massive Russian attack on Ukraine, it is believed that 19 UAVs of various types entered Polish territory. For the first time since the full-scale invasion began, the Polish Air Force and NATO allies shot down Russian drones. F-35 fighter jets were scrambled and refueled in flight by a tanker aircraft from a Dutch base. Due to, I quote, unplanned military activity, the Polish airports of Rzeszów, Lublin and Warsaw were temporarily closed. The Polish Armed Forces Operational Command said territorial defense forces were mobilized to search for downed drone wreckage. Prime Minister Donald Tusk said he is in constant contact with the President and Defense Minister, receiving updates on the operation's progress. A logical question arises, is this coincidence or a deliberate Kremlin provocation? The idea of navigation failure or Ukrainian electronic warfare causing this seems absurd. One drone could have gone off course, but several, no. And electronic jamming of the target can't work at such a distance. Besides, if the Russian drone really came under electronic warfare, then after leaving its zone of operation, it should have turned around and set course for the target again. But the map clearly shows movement toward Polish territory. The key point is this isn't the first case. On September 3rd, 2 Shaheds already entered Poland. At the time, the Polish Air Force chose not to shoot them down, viewing the threat as minimal. But what does that mean? Now the Poles will have to face this kind of threat on a regular basis. Well, it all depends on their reaction to this incident.
Stalin gave the western territories of present-day Poland to the Poles. Our friends in Warsaw seem to have forgotten about that. We will remind them.
No, of course, the incursion of a few Shaheds can't be considered something that could threaten Poland's security. But here's something interesting to pay attention to. And even more importantly, to convey this to Kiev's Western partners and most importantly to Mr. Trump. The first incident of 2 drones entering Poland, which once again cannot be a coincidence or a technical malfunction. It happened on September 3rd, right after Vladimir Putin left China. If we analyze these visits, we will come to the conclusion that visiting the People's Republic of China by Kremlin dictators almost always leads to a new round of escalation. And the drones entering Polish territory should definitely be regarded as an escalation by Moscow. So, what pattern can we observe here? Putin and Xi Jinping met at the 2022 Olympics before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. February 4th, 2 dictators meet. February 24th, the day millions of Ukrainians' lives changed. Putin and Xi next met in September 2022 at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Samarkand. The meeting was on the 15th, and by September 21st, the old man in the Kremlin announced mobilization, then held sham referendums in the occupied territories 2 days later. In March 2023, the Chinese leader flies to Moscow. As a result of the talks, Moscow and Beijing sign a joint declaration, including a statement on the inadmissibility of deploying nuclear weapons outside national territories. And exactly 3 days after the signing, Putin decides to deploy nuclear weapons on the territory of Belarus. In fact, this pattern had been observed before. After all, back in February 2014, Xi Jinping, who had just taken office as chairman of the People's Republic of China, met with Vladimir Putin at the Sochi Olympics, where, according to the media, they discussed the political crisis in Ukraine. The meeting was on February 6. On February 23, Russian troops seized Crimea. And what is this, if not Putin making fateful and aggressive decisions only after coordinating them with his Chinese big brother?
This is a change now, one that hasn't happened in 100 years. Together, we are driving these changes forward. Take care, please, dear friend.
This isn't the first time I've shown you this clip, friends. But this fully staged video, of course, was an important message for the entire Western world. It's hard to say now how Poland will react to drones entering its territory. It's even harder to predict how NATO and the United States in particular will respond to this. No, we'll see some stern tweets, but it's important for everyone to realize the changes Xi Jinping mentioned, changes unseen in 100 years. This isn't just about Donetsk or Ukraine, it's about the collapse of the entire international security system. Russian drones on Polish soil are the first, but not the last, attempts by Moscow to set new limits for its ambitions. That's why it would be extremely reckless for the democratic world to ignore the incursion of several Shaheds into Poland, because soon there will be more of them and they'll be flying even farther. Putin is clearly testing boundaries with these actions and observing how North Atlantic countries respond. As a wise man once said,
"He will go into Ukraine as far as you allow him to. If you allow it, he will go in. Kyiv won't be able to hide. Then Lviv, Ivan-Frankivsk, that's it." I believe he only understands the language of force. He doesn't understand the language of words or persuasion.
Who can show this force? You?
Well, definitely not the guy from Oklahoma.
not sure if it will impact the West's resolve against Putin. Shaheds hitting Poland? Now is the ideal time to show North Atlantic Alliance unity and, for example, declare a no-fly zone over some western Ukrainian regions to protect the Polish population. Only a decisive step will show Moscow the West won't tolerate its aggression. But if the world just expresses concern again, and such incidents will undoubtedly happen again, and it would be illogical for Putin not to repeat them, seeing the weak reaction from democratic capitals, including Warsaw. Kremlin propaganda has been pushing the idea for years that it's necessary to strike not only at Ukraine, but also at logistics hubs located in the West. Given this logic and NATO's inaction, nothing will prevent Putin from eventually targeting the Polish airfield Rzeszów, where equipment for the Ukrainian armed forces is delivered. All of this will be wrapped in the narrative that these are not strikes on Polish territory, but merely preventive measures to stop the supply of weapons to the Ukrainian regime. Do you think it won't come to that? But you see, we're not living in 2021 anymore. The world has changed drastically, and the rules no longer apply. Israel's strike on Doha sets a precedent the Kremlin will likely exploit, as it shows you can attack a sovereign state for your own security. In Qatar, the Israeli Air Force was bombing terrorists, but for Russia and the global south, this serves as a pretext. And besides, would Warsaw really be ready to declare war on a nuclear superpower over destroyed warehouses with, for example, 2 Patriot launchers that were meant for Ukraine? Especially considering that the new head of the White House, let's say, is not eager to demonstrate the unity of the North Atlantic Alliance.
Let's see how the situation develops. If not, then we will have to solve all the tasks set before us by military means.
Vladimir Putin also made this statement in China, apparently encouraged by successful negotiations with his Chinese counterpart. He is ready to fight, but not because he has unlimited strength, not because his economy is capable of supporting the military machine for decades. That's not true, but since he sees an opportunity, he's being allowed to maneuver. At the same time, let's be honest, he is able to back down if he faces serious resistance, but whether there is anyone to provide that resistance is hard to say for now. Congressman of the American Republic, John Wilson, wrote the following on his official Twitter: "Russia is attacking NATO ally Poland using Iranian Shahed drones." Less than a week after President Trump welcomed President Nawrocki to the White House, this is an act of war. And we are grateful to our NATO allies for their prompt response to the ongoing, unprovoked aggression of war criminal Putin against free and productive countries. I urge President Trump to impose mandatory sanctions to cripple the Russian war machine and supply Ukraine with weapons that can strike Russia. Putin isn't content with attacking Ukraine and bombing civilians. Now he's testing our resolve on NATO soil. Putin has declared that Russia knows no boundaries. Free and prosperous countries will teach Russia what boundaries are. Ukraine previously honored Congressman Wilson with 2 awards for his significant support of the country's sovereignty. While people like him don't currently influence the 47th president's decisions, the important thing is their voices are being heard. Mr. Trump's logic to shift Ukraine's security to the European Union to save resources for confronting China is understandable. But there's just one thing. Xi Jinping, who assured Putin at the Kremlin palace that they are driving change, was somewhat disingenuous. The costs of fighting for this new world have fallen solely on Russia. Russian and some North Korean soldiers are dying for Beijing's interests. And if the Great Dragon is doing anything to destroy American hegemony, it's just watching how the West responds to Russia and analyzing their responses. And so far he comes to a simple conclusion. If the West can't tame a country with an economy the size of Spain's, then what can it do against a powerful China whose products the whole planet depends on? A strong pushback against Russia will protect the world from both the Kremlin dictator and communist China. It is extremely important to convey this to the very best, most talented, intelligent, and eloquent president of the United States in the entire history of this country. I hope this can be done.